Welcome to another riveting episode of Pathways to Prevention, the podcast that delves into the issues that truly matter in today's world. Today, we're thrilled to have a very special guest with us, Shane Varcoe, an expert in resilience, prevention, and community building. Shane is here to share his wealth of knowledge on how understanding your why can be a game changer in your life and the lives of those around you. In this episode, we'll discuss everything from the importance of resilience in combating substance misuse to the ways in which each of us can be a leader in our own communities. Shane will also give us an exclusive look at World Resiliency Day, an initiative aimed at fostering resilience on a global scale. This is not just another episode. It is a deep dive into topics that could redefine how you approach life's challenges and opportunities. So if you're looking for actionable insights, transformative ideas, and a fresh perspective on resilience and prevention, you've come to the right place. This episode is packed to the brim with wisdom you won't want to miss. So grab your notepad, settle in, and let's get this conversation started. The vision. A world where all people live free of the burden of drug abuse. This is the Drug Free America Foundation's Pathway to Prevention podcast, where we are committed to developing strategies that prevent drug use and promote sustained recovery. Thank you for not only tuning in, but your continued support and efforts to help make this world a better place. We hope you enjoy this episode. All right, podcast listeners, we are back for another episode of the Pathways to Prevention podcast, and I've got a new friend, Shane, joining me today, and wonderful, wonderful bio and backstory here, but rather than me get into it, Shane, welcome to the podcast, and you got to tell us all about who is Shane.
David, thank you so much for having me on, mate. It's a privilege, actually. A real honor to be here. Thank you for that. And the bio, it's a lot of gravy for a very small potato, mate. There's not a lot to say about my journey. Been in this particular post for actually coming up to 15 years. And when I initially joined this very small not-for-profit charity, I expected only to be there 5 years. I was kind of brought in as a last, and the terms used were, you're our last stitch effort. If this doesn't work, we're shutting the program down. Now, so that was that pressure. That's like no pressure at all. Okay, if you don't make it work, dude, you're going to be the last CEO of a 160-year-old organization. So have at it, my friend. Have at it. So it was, that was kind of a bit of a pressure. But I would have done, if you're interested in the journey of how we sort of arrived.
That was the next question
in this place. Yeah, I was working for another charity, which was an affective domain education, started by an Australian icon, actually, by the name of Dr. John Smith. It's called Values for Life. And it was the first affective domain education vehicle in the country. In fact, so we're basically going into schools and going across the country, talking about things that, building sustainable values into kids' lives, helping them navigate culture and all that sort of stuff. In healthy ways. It included, everything from drug education right through to, peer pressure, bullying, all those kind of things. Any subject you can think of was kind of the space I was in. And I was managing that for a while. I was asked to come in and take over from someone who'd left that. And we kind of rebooted that program. And the drug issue was becoming more and more of a problem. It was always there. Australia's always had a drug issue, as most countries did have. And particularly in the 60s and 70s and, the counterculture revolution, that kind of kicked off the reemergence of substance use, although it's always been there at some level. But the program we'd started with the organization I was working for previously, called Stand For, and it was around drug education specifically. And we were starting to deploy that. And this organization had a bit of money behind them, but they had no operational presence. They didn't even have a website, and the gentleman who was in there was retired, basically. retired. So it was dead in the water, and and I wasn't aware how dead it was. And so what I did was simply presented them with our existing Stanford program. I said, look, what we'd like to do is offer this program to you. You fund it, and we'll deploy this program in schools, in communities, in society on your behalf, while you fund it. So it's kind of like a fundraising exercise, if you like, to license out this. And the gentleman who was an interim overseer of the now dormant not-for-profit, he said, "Well, give me a business plan." So I wrote literally my first business plan, and unbeknownst to me, I'm saying this because of the kind of irony. Never written a business plan. I understood them, but I never written one. So I wrote one. And he said to me, "You know what? This is one of the best business plans I've ever seen." I said, "Oh, and I didn't think, that's nice. That's a bit of a pat on the back." But then he told me, "Well, you realize that I'm a professor that I lecture at universities on business." And I went, "Oh." So it's like I went, "Oh," I think if I had any idea that was who I was presenting to, I probably would have freaked out. So, but he really liked the idea. But then he handed me, and this is literally what happened. He handed me a CV, and I said, and he said, "I want you to look at this and get back to me." I went, "Okay." So I took the document. I didn't know it was a CV, a document. I took it away. Got home and I read it. I said, "This is a CV for the CEO's role of this now dormant organization." So I rang him and said, "Ian, what's the document?" He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, this is a CV. What do you think I want you to do with it? I want you to apply for the job of CEO." I went, "Okay." He said, "Look, what you presented is really good. I think you need to run this organization and reboot it. I think you need to come in." So that was kind of the invitation. And I was quite shocked because I was obviously working with this other organization. I was enjoying the work. It was productive and successful and had, it was making a difference. So it wasn't something I was keen to leave, but there was a genuine sense that this was the next step. And I didn't realize how difficult that step was going to be until I took it. And so if you know all the details before you jump, you usually don't jump.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So I took the role, and I won't go into all the difficult details of the first couple of years, but it's proven to be a robust journey. Let's put it that way. In moving forward, taking an organization, and I say this with absolutely no self-aggrandizement at all. It's just a great board, great people, good vision, and just really focusing on helping Australians particularly, and all now Southeast Asians and other areas now, understand what's really going on and helping them make better decisions and trying to build resilient communities. That's where we've kind of landed. But if that makes sense, that's kind of the journey. The synoptic overview, if that helps.
Yeah, no, that's a fun little journey. And I could only imagine being a fly on the wall and seeing your face when you realized who you presented the business plan to and what they do. And
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about this organization that you've been mentioning. It's a little mysterious.
The one I'm working for now, obviously. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the Delgado Institute, when I came in, the existing board at that time was looking at obviously rebranding, because any listener here who's kind of over the age of 45, maybe, would understand this language. Maybe not. It tend to be more of an English, a Commonwealth-based driver. Although the Americans, certainly had their own aspects of this. But it's the work that I came into, the dormant work I came into, was basically a dying temperance movement. And to give you some context for the US, a gentleman by the name of Wayne Wheeler. It's good for your history. He was they called him presidential whisperer back in the 1910s, 1920s. He was such a high profile activist, but he was also part of the temperance movement, and he was a very big driver behind the prohibition movement in the US. Now, you guys, to your credit, the US the prohibition experiment, which has been railed against by the so-called, new bad actors in the marketplace, don't understand the history of prohibition, prohibition. A lot of countries have had prohibition. A lot of them have had prohibition. And Australia's had, and after World War I, we had a national prohibition as well. It wasn't constitutionally based, but it was legally instituted because of they didn't understand PTSD after World War I. All they knew was that all these returning soldiers were being drunk all the time, 7 days a week. So they had to curtail spending and alcohol. So anyway, but going back in, Wayne Wheeler bounced off groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and Temperance Alliances and different groups like that. And he literally, Wayne Wheeler, owned the Midwest of America, basically owned it from a lobbying perspective. And if you wanted to become president, if your party wanted to be elected, you had to have Wayne Wheeler in your camp. This is how much power he had. He was there, and the leverage this guy had, because he could move swathes of voting bloc, towards the Republican or the Democrat, depending on who's going to. So whatever group was going to say, well, we'll curtail alcohol or ban alcohol. Okay, well, I'll get these guys to vote for you, regardless of whatever other policies in play. They would vote for him. So Wayne Wheeler was a key actor. And he was one of the driving forces, along with all these other small not-for-profits, but they had a lot of leverage because they were not just anti-alcohol. They were anti the wrecking ball that this stuff was to culture, to families, and particularly to women who had, at that stage, had little rights. And it's interesting to note that, a lot of people give credit to the suffragettes for the women's right to vote. But in fact, as I understand it, again, I'm happy for your listeners to fact check me on this, is the women's first right to vote was in Australia, in South Australia, and it was done under the petitioning of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. They're the ones who got it up. It wasn't the suffragettes, it was them. So it's interesting to note that these organisations that have been around as long as ours has, because ours was an old, very old temperance union. And some of the temperance unions were religious, some of them were not religious. They were just anti-alcohol. So it wasn't like a religious moralist thing always. It was part of the equation. But it was this incredible move because society was just being undone. Undone by a wanton, reckless, off-the-lead alcohol. And so one of the first drivers behind the Prohibition movement was your Indigenous American, the Native Americans. They were the ones who first enlisted alcohol-free zones in their own term. They were the ones who started, and Wayne Wheeler got behind that as well. So this is some of the history in America. And your prohibition, what happened when you had constitutional prohibition in America, which everyone goes, oh, you started with, all you got was Al Capone. Oh, that was just absolute BS. Al Capone was operating before booze, right? Way before booze, organised, right? Years, decades before. And after the prohibition ended, it was still doing, organised crime. But what happened in the US, and I'm digressing on this, but I think it's a very powerful example of what can be done, is that the change in society, and I've got the original documents in my office, 1930s documents of the parliamentary debrief, congressional debrief on constitutional impact. And the amount of organizations that said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to our business. It's the best thing that's ever happened to our employees. Cirrhosis of the liver almost plummeted. Domestic violence plummeted. Because, all that's tied up with alcohol, the misuse of alcohol. And so this was an incredible impact. And the argument about the whole, Elliot Ness, the Untouchables, these guys, what I didn't understand was that they were also dealing with the corrupt police force because unfortunately the Irish Catholics had a big leverage in the police force. And they loved the source. So there's a lot of corruption in the police force as well. So they were fighting corrupt police. They were fighting corrupt politicians and there was all sorts of horrible things going on during this period. And of course you could drink. People didn't understand you could drink alcohol during Prohibition. You were allowed to drink. You just weren't allowed to buy it publicly. You know, manufacture it publicly, and you weren't allowed to drink it publicly. But you could still make your own alcohol at home because they understood a lot of immigrants, like Irish and Italians, like their wine. So you can make your own wine at home as long as you just drank it at home and you were not intoxicated in public. So it wasn't like there was no alcohol, but you weren't allowed to have it in a public square. And so, again, I'm digressing, but it was very powerful to watch a grassroots movement move. And this is, I think, the key point here, Dave. It moved, and that's why the need for political activism. It moved out of the grassroots dynamic from the community, but community grassroots, we just see in America a lot of guys doing that. But it also had to be top down, not just bottom up. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've done what we've done. As a historically grassroots movement, we've now moved into the top down agenda, because politics is downstream from culture. And unfortunately, culture is informing politics to a negative level. And without another alternative voice, giving rationale and reason and clarity to why this continual unleashing or letting off the leash of use of psychotropic toxins is a real concern. And the damage that's being done short and long term is horrific. So just that juxtapose, I throw that out there, you just see the extent to which it can go and the difference it can make despite the bad politics, the bad press given it by propaganda machine. It worked. It just worked. We've done it in Australia with tobacco. We've basically prohibited tobacco in real terms, even though it's a legal drug. And that's worked. So that's another story.
So if I were to ask you, how do you describe what the Delgarno Institute does? What would you say?
Okay. Delgarno Institute, to parrot our mission statement, is not without doing that. I won't do that to you. Basically, an alcohol and other drug education, advocacy, and resourcing group. Our agenda is to shift community attitudes, but from top down to bottom up, around substitute engagement with substitutes, as the idea, particularly around the illegal drug of alcohol, this is normal. This is what you do. This is what Australians do. You drink, everyone drinks, So shifting that attitude of a predetermined expectation and engagement, I think, to the option of not having to, and why not having to is best practice. And so it's not just saying, oh, alcohol is bad, don't use alcohol, or drugs is bad, don't use drugs. It's, hang on a minute. What's going on here? Why are you engaging? What's going on? And what are the impacts of this? And so have other options been presented to you? And why haven't they been presented to you? And so understanding some of the drivers behind that is important. So a lot of people don't get some of the drivers that influence their decision making. And obviously cultural predisposition is one of those drivers. The expectation that this is normal behavior. So one of the reasons we exist is to present a different norm, without being necessarily combative or adversarial, but saying, well, yeah, guys, really? This is the best you got to offer? We're going to get plastered every second night of the week. And, this is the deal. Okay. Trauma, self-medication aside, trauma-informed drug use aside, I get all that. But most of that's not. Most use in particularly illicit stuff in our country is uptake between sort of 44 and 72% of uptake is based on experimentation, and my friend offered to curiosity. See what happens. It sounds good. Everyone's doing it. Let's have a go. So it's not trauma-informed drug use, which I understand people self-medicate for all sorts. But the alcohol one is kind of like we've had the last 15 years of working hard to shift that. This is the Aussie thing to do, having a few beers down after work and footy and, go down and get past and get hammered and all that kind of, macho, what they call blokey rhetoric. And that kind of lent into a toxic masculinity issue, which, masculinity is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing and it needs to be celebrated. When it's harnessed by substances and the masculinity is expressed in, I'll be kind here, unhelpful ways, it's a dangerous combination. Drunk macho men are just awful to be around. Not just for women either, but men. So it's, that was really quite toxic. And then the last 15 years, we've seen a big shift in that. And we've been certainly not solely involved in the ones contributing to that, but we've been a big part of pushing that back and helping people have different options to what to move. And being with dads and men and just giving them more healthy options, I think, about expressing who they are as men. Being a bloke's great, awesome, but how do you express that in a healthy way? And does drug use, substance use, alcohol, particularly the legal drug, is that going to be useful for you? And certainly is weed and meth and coke and are they going to be helpful? Going to add value to you as a man and to those around you? Or is it going to take from you? So that's kind of, it's top down, bottom up, and it's education and it's advocacy. So we're working, and also resourcing. So we try and develop resources both online and in situ that can be deployed by people to shift their culture. And now again, finding contexts. And the latest offering for that is actually emerging at the moment. We're developing an internationally accredited training program on being a culture change agent, basically. So working on building resiliency into communities again and what that looks like. So, and hopefully indigenizing that in whatever setting that we find ourselves. So we're using universal principles, anthropological principles. I won't go into all the details, but obviously prevention principles, primary prevention, and recovery principles, which ironically are very similar to primary prevention. But then equipping people and helping them find ways to be strategic, strategically get it out, Shane, strategically deploy being a change agent within their context. So indigenizing it to a subcontinent, to an Indian context, to a European context, to an American context, to an Islander context. So what does that look like for you? Help you. So the principles are solid and sound for every culture for the most part, but then finding the touchstones within the culture and helping them take those preventative principles, those recovery principles, those resiliency building principles, and sewing them back into their culture to create, again, what we call fence building into the community.
I could just spend all day talking about this because so much of what you just shared hits really close to home for me. I mean, I fell into I'm a combat vet. I'm an Army guy. Like, drink, it's just what you do. Like, yeah, whiskey. You drink hard alcohol. You drink beer just because.
Yeah.
And it just took me away from who I really wanted to be. And the lessons that I've learned, though, to help me achieve and maintain sobriety are about really being clear about who do I want to be and what's going to help me be that person and what's going to take me away from being that person, bringing my A game. And actually, one of the presentations that I give is titled "Culture is the Strategy," because I've experienced the toxic impacts of culture, but I've also felt and experienced the beauty that is positive culture too. And
that's right.
Yeah. Awesome. We could just riff on that for hours on end.
Well, and that interesting though, if you don't mind me chiming in on that insight, my friend, I think this is an interesting sidebar, but I think it's an important one. That people with lived experience and earned resiliency, like yourself, incredible assets and resources if engaged well. Now, what we've got in Australia is an active, proactive, anti push against people who are in recovery being involved in any community educating exercise. And what they've done is they cherry-picked a few, and the evidence is there, cherry-picked a few evidence-based papers around misuse of recovering drug users in the education space and what they can do. Now, we know that when one of the problems with that is called the hero worship phenomena. In other words, the young 15-year-olds watching the returned vet talk about his drug issue. Maybe no, that's not fair because the returned vet's a different story. We're just talking about a guy who's been on drugs. Regardless, he's just, lived a crappy life, got on drugs, got clean, great guy. And he's telling all these horror stories, right? And again, recounting one's experience is part of the lived experience and earned resiliency dynamic and very important. But if it's not harnessed to a affective and cognitive domain education vehicle, it's just a glorified rant. And what happens, the 15-year-old kid watches the guy, goes, oh, look at this room of people. They're all fixated on this story. Oh, wow. He's got so much attention. Oh, wow. I wish I could get that attention. Oh, I know. I'll do drugs and then I'll clean and then I'll tell my story. Now that's a really horrible distilled version of the overall paper. But unfortunately that's true. So what the bad actors have done is they've harnessed that particular piece of evidence and said, you never use drug users in education. Yet the same people will happily put a battered woman up in front of a group of women. They'll happily put a survivor of a road toll up in front of car drivers and drunk car drivers. So again, the cognitive dissonance in this is staggering because in our country that the bad actors have actually engaged the policy space and they're controlling the levers now. So they're trying to keep out as many, again, preventative factors that can do this. And the best people to do this, if like exactly what you're doing, Dave, you're an icon of what is best practice in this space. You're a recovering vet, trauma-informed drug use. You're not talking about drug use solely. Drug use is a symptom of your problem. It's a symptom of a greater issue. Your toxic masculinity was informed by a whole bunch of factors, and factors. Your masculinity, sound masculinity, was informed by very good factors. But they got mixed up with the bad stuff. Substances got thrown in the mix. All of a sudden, you become the guy you didn't want to be. The culture that you wanted to express was awful. And you had to walk back out of that. And one of the key factors of walking back out of that is excising substances from your journey so that you can discover best practice and then teach preventatively best practice. That is the goal that we have as an organization. And we want to engage with people like yourself and others, but we have to do it. And in this country, we have to do it carefully. Whereas in the US, we still see a freedom of that expression. You can still go in and talk about cleverly done, wisely done, educatively done. In this country, they work really hard to shut you down. But it's interesting. Every school, every community group, every family conference we go to, and we know the power of storytelling and the science behind that, but when the narrative is introduced into the cognitive domain, evidence-based education, it not just adds value, it multiplies impact. And people don't just remember the story. Oh, that was a powerful story, Shane. Thanks for sharing. That kind of, if you hear that, you've missed the mark. They say, wow, that was an informative seminar, man. I did not know this about, And by the way, that story you told really made the point clear to me. Now that's the response you want. And that's the response we train to get. So they're the kind of mechanisms that we want to help people engage in because we want to maximize the ability of cultural change agents to make the difference that they are rightly seeking to make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for me, I had to understand my own story before I could even start talking about it. And I'm still understanding it more and more. Yep. But I also had to learn how to talk about it in a healthy way, both for my own mental health, but also for what you were just talking about, the hero complex and, not just getting up there telling horror stories, war stories. And I feel like I've honed that fairly well in that I tell parts of my dark periods, one, to other veterans that might be struggling so they know that they're not alone.
Of course.
But I don't highlight or celebrate the dark periods or dark stories. And I really do like to focus on the positive and the post-traumatic growth. And then when I give talks, I will relate back to my learning points to, hey, remember in the story I talked about, I was older than all the other college students when I got back and I didn't feel like I fit in. Sense of belonging and anchor it to a pillar or a learning point. But I can see how those bad actors could definitely take that and run with it though.
And they're trying to write opinion pieces to that end. So we're actually have developed a paper, which is about to be, we've got to several journals looking at some of the realities around, because the lived experience of recovering drug users and the principles of prevention, primary prevention are almost inseparable. And that's what we say, it's guys, walking back out of drug addiction or dependency, whatever language you want to use. Walking back out of that, how much fun was that? How much fun was that, guys? Yeah, enjoying that? That sucked, man. Yeah, I know it sucked. It really sucked. It sucked big time. So walking back out, so, and if someone had told you how not to walk into that in the first place, knowing what you know now, would you? Oh, absolutely. Okay, so now you're on the other side of trauma and recovery. You go, oh, I would have listened to you, but you back then. What would have stopped you from listening? But what would have helped you hear? They're both important elements of communication, mechanism. I mean, it's audience focused communication is very, very important. But obviously, when you walk into a room of strangers, like you move from one town to another, and you 800 kids in an auditorium, you don't know how they tick. You've got an idea of the basic demographic and some of the overviews of So therefore, you've got to understand communication theory, and what's important about getting the right data, not just spectacularly heard, but listened to. And I think that's what we're, and that's where the papers come in. So we're developing evidence-based, research that backs our educative models, which we've got already evidence that does that. But this particularly around using, recovery theory and recovery alumni in that process is really, really important. So harnessing that incredible human resource to be prevention as specialists, not recovery specialists. It's different language. You're Dave. Look, you've mastered that. Well, mastered very strong word, but you're mastering that. No, I think that's a celebration point for you. You've mastering that because a lot of recovery people, and this is not criticism at all. In fact, we engage with a lot of recovery alumni now and trying to help them become prevention people. And 9 out of 10 can't do it. They can't make the leap. They're happy to talk to a recovery drug user about their experience. They're happy to, but trying to move into a prevention space, into a prevention mindset where they don't just talk about the stuff that's happened and I can identify, I can relate. All those are absolutely vital in the recovery sector. But how can I prevent? How can I harness that experience and invert it? Now that's an art form. It's got to be taught, and it can be learned, and something that you're developing. And I think that's and something so we're moving forward. We'd love to be able to engage with you, but I think that's I think that's part of what we want to do is that taking that recovery alumni and incredible, again, reiterating for a purpose here, incredible human resource that can be an incredible catalyst for change in a community, particularly a community that lacks resilience. And we have a saying at Delgado Institute: resilient communities don't use drugs. Resilient families don't want them. It's that simple.
Yes. And talking about recovery and prevention, one last little tidbit here, and then I want to come back to the saying. Actually, one of my good friends and fellow prevention leaders, Carrie Terhart, was talking with me 2 weeks ago, actually. And we weren't talking about addiction. We were talking about just self-care. Yeah. And that there's an increased awareness and focus and talk of self-care these days, post-COVID pandemic and all that. But folks tend to think of self-care as, oh, I'm really stressed out. I need to hit pause and go exercise, go for a walk. And Carrie's like, that's treatment. What if we look at self-care from a prevention perspective, and self-care are preventive activities, not, okay, I'm overmaxed, overloaded, I need to hit pause and take a break.
No, that I think it's, I'll use a term that, a prevenient act. And I think, the context is really important, and things like developing, as obviously in that space, developing mindfulness, because a mindful, and these are meditative practices that are millennia old. Most religions have some context for this, and we just trying to hijack those ancient wisdoms and trying to make them new. Our clever. It's like, dude, you're going back 2,000 years. Get a grip. It's okay. The old sometimes works. Let's run with it. But I think I think that it's important that, and this is part of the resiliency developing. And so what is resilience? Is it learned? And you made a comment before about, who am I and that sort of things. And one of the things that we throw up in our resiliency space is the why, W-A-Y. Who are you? Why are you? Who are you? Why are you? Why? What's your way? What's your way? We talk about resiliency scripts, and it's a cheeky term. I say, if you haven't got an RS, you're RS. And that means if you haven't got a resiliency script, you're really stuck. You were going somewhere else, weren't you? So
maybe.
So, and again, the resiliency script is, again, prevenient is, okay, I'm building this in place. So when I'm watching these things emerge, I'm already heading them off, or I don't actually go there anymore. I don't get oversubscribed and overtaxed because I'm already aware of this mechanism. And often people think the resiliency, and I'm a victim of this. This is confession time here. Can I increase my capacity to do more? What more can I cram into my no margin schedule? What more load can I put on my back to carry? And then I get to the point where I'm going to collapse. Like, it's not fair. There's too much going on. This is too hard. I need to bail. I need help. And you go to that mode and you say, well, dude, hang on. It's like, why'd you keep loading yourself up? Oh, because I could, because I felt okay. And then I didn't feel okay, like you said. And then I've got to take a pause. Whereas my pause tends to be kind of and then you start complaining about, the lack of resources and you got to go, just back it down a bit, man. Come on. You saw this coming. You still chose to load yourself up. So I think building resiliency, and again, part of what we talk about the resiliency definition is like a bungee rope. Resiliency doesn't stop you from falling because you will fall. Everyone falls. We all I think that's one of the things that we say to young people. And, so you know what, guys, here's some reality checks for you. Just a couple of pointers here. Life's going to get tough. You're going to have some really messy stuff happen. In fact, you're going to have some tragedies. And then you'll die. What's this all about? I said, dude, what have you been told? It can be anything. Life is great. If it's not working for you, you're doing something wrong. You can make it better. If you feel lousy, just take a pill and you'll be okay. That's it. That's the narrative they've been given. So there's absolutely no prevenient work in regard to building resiliency. It's like, well, hang on, there's an expectation, not of harm and damage, but an expectation of a reality that we live in a world that is broken and stuff's going on. And in the old argument, it's yourself, Dave, as a recovery drug user, hurting people hurt people. And if you don't hurt someone's going to hurt you. So how do you manage that? What does that look like? If there's an expectation of pain, but there's an expectation, things can go wrong. And I'm okay with that. I'm not going to avoid that. I'm ready for that. What does it ready look like? I'm going to fall. Is my bungee rope going to help me spring back, or am I going to go splat? And that's kind of the agenda, the underlying agenda of what we do. And as I said before, alcohol and other drug use is a symptom of a bigger problem. It creates its own maelstrom. It's such a shocking maelstrom that it takes all our attention. But we've got to get back using the Covey's quadrants. Got to get back to the first quadrant, important and urgent, not the important and not urgent quadrant, the strategic quadrant. What's really going on here? Sure, I can go after the symptom and it's horrendous and it's horrific and it needs to be addressed. No argument. All I'm doing is symptom management. I'm not dealing with the disease. I'm not dealing with the cause. I'm not dealing with the dysfunction. So again, building into the culture, the very things that recovery people learn as they walk back out of this stuff, so that people don't walk into this space. They don't have to self-medicate. Well, they don't get bored. And so, I'm bored. That's another story. We'll get in that line. But I think that's really important, that resiliency is, and it's a learned thing. Some people are naturally resilient, and I'm not one of those people. I am. People would argue that I should have been in a nut house a long time ago, because I'm an emotionally very fragile person, cognitively very capable and able, and my agency is very strong. But emotionally, I'm very fragile, Dave, and my personality belies that, unfortunately. But yeah, stress and anxiety, and I've had 2 bouts of depression that just came out of left field, and sometimes there's reasons for it. The old principle about anxiety, you become anxious when you don't know what's coming next. You become depressed when you can't control what's coming next. So they're identifiable. fact. But yeah, I've had a couple of things that really knock socks off you. I mean, it is shattering, and you've no doubt experienced that as well. So, some people are naturally half glass full, buoyant, they're always upbeat, not friends like that. Nothing ever phases them, genuinely. I'm not like that. So my resiliency has to be learned. It has to be intentional. And I have to understand strategies and enact those strategies. And I think for a larger and ever increasing number of our population, that's a reality that needs, and I think part of our movement is to build that back into society. We're not solely responsible, but we are part of that architecture, I think, that we need to invest in.
I can relate. I like to say that I can handle physical pain. I've got a high pain tolerance when it comes to that, but emotions, but I've had to learn a lot and still learning as well.
Of course.
Yeah, we should talk more about that offline as well.
Sure.
You mentioned your sort of slogan or saying, and you included community resiliency. Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Sure. It is can open up quite a big brief. And look, I don't want to make things too complicated, but I think one of the difficulties about a culture that continues to making things and understanding accessible does not necessarily equal dumbing it down. I think we do a great disservice, particularly the young people, we do a great disservice by dumbing stuff down. Deconstruction should never, ever, this is where it's important in every education model, it should never, ever undermine the whole of what you're trying to do. So when you deconstruct something down to its components, and basically in so doing, you enable a person to understand a component. That's great. They've got that component, but they haven't got the whole. So basically they haven't learned anything. They've just picked up on an idea. They haven't understood what you're trying to teach. So good educators really get young people particularly and families to understand what it looks like to build a resiliency script, a resiliency framework. So resilient communities. Now, we move out of, I hope some of the listeners will get this. Hopefully all of them will. And again, here's communication theory at work, Shane. Are you going to dumb it down, or are you going to deconstruct it, or are you going to make it accessible? So put theories in play, people. In the comment section, be kind, all right? If I missed the mark, be kind. But if we look at things sociologically, and sociology is a very important observational tool. It's an emerging science. I understand that. So it tends to look cross-sectionally at a society and how it's functioning at any given time and what's going on, some of the behaviors, some of the manifestations, some of the phenomena, some of the patterns. Perfect. We need to see that and understand what's going on. But getting behind that as to, what, and again, this is where your cognitive domain and your affective domain are both important. So cognitive domain deals with who, what, when, where, how, right? But affective domain deals with why. Why? We say to young people, to families, part of our standard narrative, if you don't know why, you are fodder for the system. A person without a sustainable because is easy to manipulate, coerce, seduce, and intimidate. A person with a sustainable because is harder to move. Not immovable, but harder to move. So what's the because? Now, the person who doesn't have a sustainable why often shifts to the why not? Why not? Why not? You see? Now, the why not is a lovely cultural cliche that young people go, why not, man? Okay. So, but that's a hole you don't want to start digging, effectively in the age of 15. You don't want to dig that hole. That's a hole that leads to the place where you've been. And then you've got to dig your way out of it. And that's a pig. Digging your way out of that why not hole is a pig. So let's talk about the why. Now, resilient communities, and this is what's important, anthropologically. Now we move into the anthropological space, which is basically anthropology, study of all of humanity. So it deals with not just cross sections of phenomena and behavior and certain environments. It deals with start to finish. So it's all of life experience, including what you believe. What's your paradigm? What's your worldview? Are you subject to meta narratives? If there's no meta narrative, what narrative are you subject to? What's informing your resiliency script? So where do you derive your principles for sound decision making from? Where do you derive your decisions for, basic epistemology? Now, how we know things to be true, basically cohesion, coherence, and this is a very basic one. And those who are in this field will go, oh, using the basic one. Yeah. Cohesion, coherence, and pragmatism. In other words, does it hold together? Does it make sense? And does it work? That's not just does it work. Is that William James, I think the father of American psychology? Well, truth is what works. Well, that's a very limited statement and it's misused by many. But the truth is what works, what is coherent, and what is cohesive. So this is logical and it makes sense. It holds together and it does actually work. It's empirically adequate, right? So that's really important. So I'm using some terms here, but my point is that when a community isn't resilient and it doesn't offer the emerging citizen a framework to develop their understanding of the world, then that creates a dissonance. This is really powerful. When I say, sorry to some of your listeners this might trigger them. I honestly do apologize. I don't want to do that. But if I say the term sexual abuse, automatically that triggers something in your head. When I say physical abuse, and you're probably, this one for you, I get that straight away. If I say verbal abuse, well, straight away we get that. But if I say cultural abuse, what does that mean? What does it look like? And one of the biggest deconstructors of a human being, particularly male, is neglect. Science tells us that the evidence is out there. And again, I apologies in advance for listeners and sufferers of sexual abuse. When a girl is sexually abused, what it does to the amygdala and the emotional memory, if you like, of the brain, it does all sorts of horrible things. PTSD is in this space as well, as you're aware. That trauma, the impact on that girl, as you can imagine, is horrific, right? Horrific. We're not going to go down that road. However, what they found in the science, you do the same, to get the same impact on a 12, 13-year-old, a male child, same impact as sexual abuse on a girl, all you have to do is neglect it. Just leave them alone. Ignore it. Same trauma. Same deep amygdala brain trauma. Now that is cultural abuse. Now when you're suffering from that, you don't have any resiliency capacity. You don't have the basics of, without even going into the belief systems and values and worldviews, going to the fundamentals of loving family, a family that sets boundaries. Hopefully they've got a worldview that informs those boundaries. They have rules. Why? Because something else is informing those rules. We just made it up as we went along, which is what the Nazis did in World War II. So it was utterly barbaric and immoral, but to them it was, this is our rule. This is our worldview. So again, what's informing the behavior? So when it comes to building resilient communities, we need to be talking to not just the family. It's important, but what's informing the family and what's informing the culture. Because, who's crafting? And as I said, rules don't change society. Society changes. So whoever's controlling the levers of policy starts to say, like, Australia, the stoners want to take charge, want to get the government, they get the government, then they throw, let's legalize weed bill into everyone wants weed, and they start their propaganda campaign, and they push their narrative, and people are informed by that. And if there's no other informing narrative in the marketplace, so why not use weed? Why not use drugs? They make you feel good. Sure, there's some downsides, but as long as you don't hurt anybody, what's the harm? But we know that all drug use is a wrecking ball. And again, societal wrecking ball, cultural wrecking ball. This doesn't add to culture. This creates a destructive culture. So that's an important distinction. So when we're building resilient communities, we need to visit every aspect. So, what do people think? And why do they believe the way they believe? What's informing that? And once you get people in that space, Darby, they also go, oh, I never thought of that. In other words, if you don't want to be we use the term wheelbarrow. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. On our website, a no-brainer website, we've got a page called wheelbarrow. Now, wheelbarrows are empty, powerless vessels that are filled by someone else and pushed by someone. Every single person on the planet born today, up to the age of around 10, is a wheelbarrow. Someone else is filling them and someone else is pushing. Now, when you hit adolescence, your brain kicks into a new level. You start to be self-determining. They call it rebellion. It's not rebellion. We're designed to seek reward and exploration, not rebellion and experimentation. And so what happens is if they're not informed properly, they will pursue experimentation and rebellion rather than reward and exploration. And so what happens is this person's a wheelbarrow. So who's pushing it and who's filling it, guys? And as adults, you got to go, hey, man, you're like a wheelbarrow. Well, someone's filling you and pushing you, man, because you're just a parrot. You're just barking what you've heard from social media. And again, a person without a sustainable because is easy to manipulate, coerce, seduce. And so young people want to be empowered. Oh, I'm in charge. I'm in control. Now, look, you're noisy on social media, dude, but let's push a few buttons and see what comes out, you know? Are you an influencer or are you a thermometer or are you a thermostat? Yeah, that's the other one. Thermostats set the temperature. Thermometers just follow it. So I hope there's a lot of words there, but I hope that kind of makes sense because you have to go bigger than just technical ideas. You have to move into more a strategic space when it comes to building resiliency into culture.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to say it again, culture is a strategy. And one of my little soapboxes or rants is that I feel like in prevention, we get so focused on what are actually tactics, the programs, the initiatives. We don't step back and look at what is the big picture strategy as a whole.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good, Doug.
So you've talked a little bit about RS, resiliency scripts. Yep. Can you hit us with like an example or what could one look like?
Oh, now you're asking for some trade craft secrets and some deep copyrighted proprietary information. So look, I think again, these things coalesce together. I think that's really important. And as we know, we talk about it, you guys have ever used the hand model of support. Have you heard that one? Basically, you got 5 people in your life that are for you. So you've got, a caring parent. It helps you get a grip, if you like, You get the caring parent, you got a medical professional, whether medical or, that you can trust and that wants to, looks after your health, well-being. Hopefully you got both parents love you and that's obviously various family constellations don't permit that, but at least one parent that actually cares about you, cares about your development, sets boundaries, has expectations and invests in you. One helpful friend who gets you to understand you, is supportive of you, not to do bad things, but, and one other, preferably an adult, a mentor of some kind. So those factors work together. But when those are in play and they're helping you understand what it's like, okay, so building goals. So you got purpose and you got meaning. And this is what we want to distinguish between the two. And I think, and both are important, absolutely. But one layer is higher again. And I think this is where one of the biggest, and it's a good strategy to have in place. And we hear people using it all the time. What's your purpose? And so finding purpose in life is very important. So causes become the thing. Everyone's got a cause, and they're going to rant and rave about their cause. And some of those causes can be very good. Others can be very, very toxic. But that's their thing, and all of a sudden their identity is in their cause. So crafting identity without being cause focused is important. And therefore you go one level back because meaning should umbrella purpose because purpose can be taken away from for all sorts of reasons. And therefore, I think it was Bainbridge and Stark, two of the world's leading sociologists back in the 90s. They wrote a very, very good textbook, which went in and out of use because it's an older data, but it was called Religion, Deviance and Social Control. They were looking at and the sort of manufacturers and culture. The Bainbridge and Stark, and there's lots of different internal and external factors. You've heard all these before for resiliency, and they're all great. They're wonderful. But they basically distilled it down, and this is going back seminal work. This is a seminal work done to 4 key elements. Every child, every developing person needs good education. Now we've touched on that. It's not just cognitive domain, it's affective domain. They enjoy being at school. They enjoy it. They learn how to learn. So they are lifelong learners, not just parroting information to pass an exam and move on to that. And that their experience at school it's socially enjoyable. It's therefore bullying and stress and all those things can be a real impediment to enjoying the learning education experience. The second one is family. Your family, as I said before, I won't go to the details again. You can imagine loving, caring, supportive, invested family. That's really important. So equipping them to do that. And so then kids involved in community groups, right? Example, sporting clubs. Sport is has a huge capacity to build resiliency and build capacity and build agency in people. Fantastic. The downside of sport is that it does have a performance component to it. And at some point, your performance is not going to match the expectation. And that ends your connection with that level of community. And that's always a tough one. So that can be, and particularly if people have invested their whole sense of resiliency around the success in that arena, they're undone. And they're the ones who usually, go hit the bottle or, want to feel better or because their identity was tied up in their achievement or their purpose. But don't get me wrong, very important, but meaning, and then they said the last one is interesting, meaning, and this is we say to students when we're talking, parents, in fact, who has said, I think I mentioned previously on other events, but who has said or thought in the last 5 to 24 hours, did they say the last 10 minutes, I'm bored. Every hand in the place goes up. Every hand. And so it's interesting. Going back to Bainbridge and Stark, their work. And they said, you know what, you're the most entertained generation that's ever lived on the planet, bar none. Bar none. You are entertained to the max. You've got every kind of gadget and idea and potential. I said, yet you're simultaneously the most, what's going on? Boredom, according to Bainbridge and Stark and their sociological, spelunking of the data, said it's got very little to do with the lack of entertainment and everything to do with the lack of meaning. That is the key issue. And in fact, a person with this, again, get back to the sustainable why, it's sustainable because if you've got a strong, immovable, sustainable why, your family can be dysfunctional and gone, your friends can be dysfunctional and gone, and your purpose can go. But you can still hold. That's missing from the equation at the moment in culture. That's been excised because when you want to deconstruct culture and you want it to go a certain way, you've got to, and Karl Marx, he talked about religion. He said, religion is the opiate of the masses. In other words, we need to disconnect them from religion because it's just it's another drug. But he had an agenda. So using religion as a meaning, for example, using it as a meaning platform, there are other meaning platforms. That's one of them. So the idea is, okay, well, what are you going to replace it? Well, we'll replace it with our ideology. So an ideology then takes up place. And the question is, that's fine. There's lots of ideologies, there's lots of ideas, but which one is sustainable? Which one is going to build healthy, safe, productive, caring, supportive, mutually affirming community? And which one is going to deconstruct? And which one is a cultural abuse and which one is a cultural, salve is the word. We're going to salve. I think they're the questions that need to be brought into play. So when we're talking to young people, we don't just talk about, okay, you can do this, you can join a sporting club, you can join a community of faith, you can have a religion, have a philosophy, have a whatever. You want to build a family, you want to find that 5 connection network. So all those things, it's not just necessarily a series of tactics you engage, but it is a series of relationships and involvements that you embrace. And that's where this is the big kicker. We need help to do that. I'm sure of your journey, Dave, out of your your recovery wasn't done without support and facilitation at some point. And that's it. And that's the human experience. That's the human experience. So what we do in a digital age where we disconnect personally to the whole, here's my phone. Which app will help me do this? Don't get me wrong. There's some really good apps out there and they're great and they're supportive and they can help you. But at the end of the day, we're human. The human animal needs meaningful connection, needs it. And it flourishes on it, builds on it. And that flourishing is what we want to help facilitate in community. So therefore, in all those words, I haven't given you, here's 5 quick, easy answers. I've given you the key components that are necessary, and it is labor intensive in one sense. And that's why, the digital age it basically disempowered us to be the change agents we want to be. We want to try and switch that around again using technology to help us be a change agent, not take away from our capacity to be a change.
Absolutely. Using it as a tool and a mean, and talking about the why or the because. I know you can't see it from your perspective, but my computer wallpaper is my why statement. It's my nice little reminder every day why I do what I do. Just to be a nice little, just a reminder. It's so important. It's my compass.
Perfect. That's it. Compass. Perfect. And giving communities back compasses. Really important.
Mm-hmm. We've been chatting for a little while now. So before we wrap up, I've got to hear about World Resiliency Day. Tell me all the things about it.
Sure. What we had in abeyance for some time is, again, obviously we talked about it at length today, and thanks for letting me parrot on. Appreciate that. The resiliency dynamic is really important. Again, it's a key element to all the things that we talk about. Not the only element, but it's a key element. And it's one of the, again, using your terms, foundational pillar we do. And what it sat there for a long time. And this year we decided, looking again at World Drug Day, with the World Day Against Drug Trafficking and Drug Misuse and the United Nations set up, it's a June 26th kind of thing. It's important and absolutely vital. We support it. We speak into that from a prevention and recovery perspective. And again, there's lots of different angles around that, which we understand and value, but our primary focus is prevention and drug use exiting recovery. So that's kind of our priority. But we thought a lot of the language around that space was very much about, and understandably, this is not a critical thing at all. Please hear that. It's about pushing back against bad stuff. And we need to do that. Again, pushing back against the bad is a key element. But at the same time, you've got to sow something in. And there's an old, again, what's sort of an anthropological principle, where you stand determines what you look at, and what you look at determines what you see. So the question about perspective is, where are you standing, man? Where are you standing? Okay, I get it. That's why you're seeing what you see. Come this way. Just come this way. Now have another look. What do you see now? Oh, okay. Yeah. Paradigms are important, and we've all got our confirmation biases. We've all got our little things that we go on, but looking at different perspectives is important. So we wanted to rather than being a reactive, and reaction is important. To push back against the bad is vital. But at the same time, part of that pushing back is adding value, throwing in a proactive and a protective element. So we talk about risk issues, risk factors. We also want to talk about protective factors. So World Resiliency, we created World Resiliency internationally. No one else did that. So we thought, well, let's launch it. So we launched it, soft launch, I must admit, because it was just after World Drug Day we did this. And we've created a new web platform, and we're developing that. We're opening that up to our international partners in prevention. And we wanted to be guest bloggers, and we'll do bits and pieces, and we'll do podcasts around that as well. But the idea is to really help. We're still obviously looking at the drug issue, but again, treating the drug issue seriously, but as a symptom. Again, going back to that symptom model, it is a symptom. Okay, and it's a symptom we have to address, but we address it by looking at causes. So let's go back to causes. And trauma-informed drug use, that's a clear, easy one. Okay, we need to deal with trauma. Bad environments, so kids growing up in poverty and in abuse, all those things. That's an easy is a word. That's an easy understander, not an easy fix. I get it. We need to help get out of poverty. We need to get them employed, educated, good healthcare. That makes sense. That's easy. Sorry. It's an easy, you understand what I'm saying. It's a hard thing to do, but it's an easy one to understand. But when it comes to the Western culture, where we live pretty much in luxury by comparison to a lot of the developing countries, we don't have the trauma of abject poverty, slum living. We don't have the trauma of parental neglect and abuse, sexual abuse. We have this kind of comfortable lifestyle that keeps informing us that we try and be as pain-free as possible. I think Freud got one thing right. He said, most of human behavior can be distilled down to maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And that was an observation, not an affirmation, by the way, but he was, calling it out, basically that. So, but we know pleasure, it doesn't develop us. It's a nice thing and it can give us, it can alleviate, and can amuse, but pleasure does not develop us. Ultimately, does not develop us. The things that have shaped your life, I think you mentioned before, were, and as ugly as they've been, is a lot of the trauma. You are stronger, better, wiser, more robust, more capable than ever been before, not because of pleasure, but because of trauma. So again, tasking and resiliency to engage that negative resource proactively to bring about change is something we want to see through resilience, World Resiliency. And that's kind of the big driver. And of course, there's lots of viewpoints, yours, and obviously that they can speak into that, and we will harness those and glean those. And that's what we want to do. It's not just about Delgado. It's like our thing, although we certainly own the domains. It really is about, you have to register them, otherwise the bad guys get it, they do their thing. But we want to create a resource that helps people look at more proactive ways of doing things. And again, how do we move and what do we do to shift that rather than leave you in that space? And resilient people bounce back. Non-resilient people have real trouble bouncing back, if they bounce back at all. They fall without a bungee rope, and I'll bungee. It's fun. But if I got no bungee rope, I fall, and the fall's great. The fall's awesome. It's the deceleration trauma that does the damage. It's the sudden thud at the end. And if I haven't got a bungee rope, I'm in trouble. And so we want to give communities, young people, families, bungee rope. We want to give them bungee. So when they do fall, and they will fall, because we all fall. Life's tough, but we can bounce back. And drug use is not part of that bungee rope. Drug use is at their default position of, I feel like crap. I want to engage a substance. I feel better, even if just for a minute. And as Dr. John Smith said, I feel better, but I'm only getting, I feel better, but I'm only getting, I feel better, only getting. So each little high just takes us into a deeper hole. So again, we want to, it's not just telling people that's a problem. How do we avoid that problem? But how do we become the people that, if we need to transition from victimhood, how do we do that? To prevent us from entering into whatever reason into a substance use. How can we do that? Prevention is better than cure every single day and twice on Sunday.
How can our listeners get involved the next World Resiliency Day? How can they get involved with the resources? What all you got?
Sure. Look, we'd like to, firstly, obviously, promote the website, not just so you go along and tag in, obviously become a member, sign up for the newsletter, which we're developing, like as an emerging resource. But also, and again, everyone wants to pitch their stuff. So I'm going to be careful about this kind of offer. But, if again, people like the people in your journey you're on, Dave, rather than, a psychologist, and again, I'm not here to be critical, but psychologists says, I've got a great resiliency program. I might be able to sell it through this website. If that's your agenda, don't really approach me. You got your work. It's great. And, we can, if you're doing a great job and it's working to help people become resilient, stay away from drugs, we might, stick you on our website as a partner. Great. Knock yourself out. But we're really interested in people's journey and again, lived experience and earned resiliency that can be harnessed to equip. And so how that frames it could be a blog post, it could be a technical, a series of technical things that you talked about or strategic things, or maybe just a story, that not just tells a horror story and all of a sudden I got happy and life was, but it's like, these are the things that help me journey out of that and really creating an empowering vehicle that it is, again, the digital space. So it's one dimensional in that sense. So it's not the answer. It is a component in hopefully an overall strategy where people are building that 5-finger network, support, mentors, good families, stronger communities, good mental health and health professionals that are helping to make smarter decisions, friends that care about their well-being, not just having a good time together. Those kind of things we want to foster. And then that's one of the reasons why we created space. And of course, ultimately to keep people away from substance use, because all substance, no matter how the initial buzz gives you, is a wrecking ball to your humanity. And the pro-drug advocates and the psychonauts that love to laud this stuff as their new religion, it's undoing them. And if it doesn't kill them now, it'll kill them later. And I think one recovering drug group says, drug use, you either quit or you die. And pretty much distilled down to its raw essence. And that's not to pick on, please, not here to say denigrate drug users, you're all a bunch of men. That's not the narrative we're using. We know that this is undoing you. We know this is unraveling you. And your defense mechanisms, like first person that told you, hey, Dave, you're an alcoholic. Oh, screw you, man. I'm not an alcoholic. Drop dead. I don't have a problem. You got a problem. It's like that. There's a wall up. We get that. And that drug use is a terrible master. And it's a jealous master mistress. And it will protect that addiction. It'll protect it with everything it's got, to your detriment, sadly. But that's a whole different journey down in recovery, which we.
I see the creation, the launch, the promotion of World Resiliency Day as just elevating that conversation or creating opportunities to have that resiliency conversation. And through those conversations, you'll create ripples, or we will create ripples, and those ripples will start to create culture change.
Well, wonderfully said, mate. Beautiful. Thank you. And I think that's what we're aiming to do. And I think, again, collectively, that we want to do. I think it's not just a Delgado, it's our initiative, but it's not a Delgado issue. It's us. And there's already Drug Free America, one of our partners already on the website. We've got, other ambassadors that are in different spaces in the Australian community. They're on board. So, we're really, we're really keen to see not our resource used, but the resource grow and become the tool it can be for community.
Beautiful. And in one of my other kind of rants or big passion points is that in prevention, we are all leaders. Doesn't matter what your title is. You could be a parent, a friend, a colleague, a director, a boss. We're all leaders. And from the book, The Culture Code, the author talks about, he calls it the bad apple story. And it was research done where they had an actor secretly. He was a member of this group of students. They're tasked with creating like a marketing plan for a business. They had a specific amount of time. They're all strangers, but this actor would play different roles in the groups to see the impact that would have on the group dynamics, the group culture. Yeah. And he would play like Eeyore, wah, bah, humbug. He'd be a slacker. He'd be a jerk. Yeah. And in all of the groups, how he acted would shape or shift the culture. If he was just kind of the slacker, the group would slack off and wouldn't perform as well. They'd say, oh yeah, we did great. We did awesome. But really it was rather subpar performance. If he was the jerk, they would all end up going after each other. And there was one group though, that was the outlier group. And it's because no matter what role the actor played, there was one individual there that would simply deflect, disarm, and create safe space and invite everybody else in. And the moral of that story is that one person, no matter your position, how you show up, how you interact with others, can help shape and influence culture. And us as prevention leaders, how we show up, how we interact, how we carry ourselves can have
Beautiful.
positive impacts
Beautiful.
in culture.
No,
Really can.
absolutely. I think that's it, vital. And I think that's where, again, the thermometer versus thermostat model comes in. Now, are you a thermostat? Because if you're a thermostat, you set temperature. Now, good or bad, I think Dr. Bill Clinton, not the president, Dr. Bill Clinton wrote a book on leadership. He said, leadership is influence. And influence is leadership. So whatever influence you have is you're leading. So again, what influence are you bringing to the setting? And that you've just indicated. So what influence are you bringing? And people think, oh, you have to be a strong personality, a directive, coercive, or seductive. No. You carry yourself again with that, the things you've just indicated beautifully, Dave. I think that's a really important distinction. And that's what we say to people. Parents are kind of in despair because their kids are subject to this cultural bombardment around substance abuse. And all kids are doing it. And this is normal behavior. And the normalization mantra is one of the key issues to undermine culture. Creating a new normal is really, really, really important. And families still have a good, solid family, maybe a single parent family, maybe a blended family. But if they have a good, strong narrative, they've got very clear scripts in their home, and they hold those scripts in loving, caring, supportive, empowering vibes, then you're going to have a huge influence on how your kids see the world, how they place themselves in it, how they act in it. And again, those other influences trying to come at them, they'll be, my wife's pretty solid, dude. I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah, don't get bounced around. Look, peer pressure is awful. I know what that's like. But to watch grown men fold does my head in. Does my head. Especially in the alcohol space, I'm thinking, dude, what is going on here? This is the grown-up space. Can you be a grown-up? Can you? That's it. That's another conversation.
I would say that'll have to be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put a lot of links to your websites in the show notes for listeners, so they can all get connected and be a part of World Resiliency Day.
Okay.
And I've got one last question for you before we hit stop record. And this one, I didn't prep you for it, so take your time.
Sure.
If you were to tell our listeners, if you're going to remember one thing from this episode, remember this. What would that be?
I think that for the purposes of today, know your why. Know your why. And for some people, that's going to be a little easier than others. But understanding why am I? First order question are often ignored by our culture. Second order questions are quite common. Now, where am I going? Who's going with me? What's in it for me? What am I going to do? What am I going to become? They're important questions. No argument there. But the first order question is, why am I here? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? What of evil? They're the first order questions. And if we engage with those, that helps us discover the why that we are. And I think people engage actively rather than, and this is really important, Dave, for your listeners. Don't bump this question and it bump you back and you walk away from it, because it will bump you back. Because if you're not used to asking why, this is not in your world, it's just another thing you have to do. And I'm too busy. What I'm doing is working, and every now and then have a few drinks, take the edge off, okay. I don't need to think about the big issues here. I know it's too complicated. So that's what you hear coming back. Can I encourage listeners to push? No. This is not just about me. It's about my family. It's about my future. It's about the future of my community. And I think once you start engaging in that space, then your capacity to create a resilience is exponentially increased. And that is it's not just about your resilience. You become, as you said beautifully, you become that leader. And our culture, like never before, needs leaders. 13-year-old leader, 18-year-old leader, 45-year-old leader, 96-year-old. We need people who can, resiliency, bring resiliency, because they know why and they know how to help people move forward. And I think that, I know, again, check me on the quote here, Carl Adams, some sort of academic who said, he who knows how will always have a job. He who knows why will always be his boss. So I think if you want to be a person that's going to shape influence, not just for your success, but for those around you, know your why. Sustainable, defendable why. Know it.
And with that last bit of wisdom there, I will simply say it's been an honor. Truly grateful for our conversation and hopefully future collaborations, because prevention is better together. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me.
Thank you very much. It was absolute joy.
That concludes this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and share this episode with a friend before you leave. And we look forward to seeing you on social media, because prevention is better together. Together, we are stronger.